Hello, friends. Old, new. Welcome back to the channel. So, first, I want to thank Mason with Cardinal Gaming. I'll put a link to his channel down in the description below. If you haven't visited with him already, go check him out. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Mason, for the shout out. I really appreciate it. You've helped me out a lot. So, one of my goals for this business as a whole is to help improve the market for all participants. So it's always nice to find out that others are doing so as well. You know, I hate checking the condition for all the cards that come in. So it's really great to see that TCGplayer have put out a document, link below, of their card conditioning standards. Now I know it's very likely that some of you know how to read. But for those of you who don't, or who don't feel like reading, or just like the sound of my voice, I thought I would go through this guide, provide some real examples of the wear that they're talking about, and then close out with a little bit of my process for and decision framework for how I go through checking condition for cards. Firstly, tell me in the comments about a time you received cards that were not in the condition that you expected them to be in. I imagine this happens a lot, probably to everyone who's ever bought cards online. This has happened to. So I want to hear your stories. I want to read your stories. And remember, if you need any supplies, if you pick them up through BCW Supplies, you can save 10% off of your order with my promo code, TCGBoltKings. So, in their introduction section, TCGplayer give a rundown of basically why they're doing this, which essentially boils down to it's the best customer service if conditioning is standardized in the industry, and best able to meet expectations if the market at large either adopts or at least acknowledges their standards. Here's a quote: "A clearly defined and universally adopted conditioning standard is the best way to create an informed TCG community where sellers and hobbyists speak the same language and as a result can trade even better." Now they talk a little bit about the difference between conditioning and grading. Grading is kind of used standardly in the industry as sending off a card to a professional grading service that then return the card with a numerical value that identifies the condition of the card. Conditioning, as TCGplayer understands it, is to drop a card into a range, not a numerical defining measurement of the grade of the card. So it is not an 8 or a 9 or a 10, it is near mint or light play. And they work from that towards the rest of this document here. They address the subjectivity of conditioning, and that the whole point of this is to minimize that subjectivity so that conditioning is repeatable and kind of scientific because of that. Also, these guidelines are intended to be used across every different type of card that's printed and different printings of cards. So there are not different guidelines for foils and versus non-foils, etched foils or cold foils versus regular or rainbow foils. There can be differences between print runs of different games. Magic and Pokemon aren't to be treated differently from Star Wars CCG or LOL Surprise Dance-Off TCG. All cards should be judged with the same criteria for any damage or wear that cannot be attributed to the card's printing process. So that means just because they're printed differently, the conditioning discussing the difference from their original printed form, not differences in the printing process. So then it moves on into definitions. First it defines imperfections. There are two different characteristics of any imperfection in a card: the type of imperfection and the severity of the imperfection. The type of imperfection talks about the difference between edge wear or scuffing or scratches or bends, and the severity is it a slight edge wear or is it a major bend? We'll go into the different types of imperfections that they list here with some real world examples with some real light falling on them so you can really see the differences between them. Okay, so we're just going to go through the different types of imperfections that can occur on cards. We're going to start with edge wear, and here we go. We've got a card here with some considerable but slight edge wear. You can see the whitening across the top here. There's another spot right over here. That is enough to be considered slight edge wear. maybe even minor edge wear as it extends over so much of the top of the card here. Next we have scratches. I have a couple of cards with scratches here. This card here has a scratch right there at the top. You can see right in the center of the frame there. And that runs all the way from the middle of the card to the edge. And you can see that pretty clearly if you get the light to hit it just right. This is a card here with multiple scratches on it. Next we have surface wear. This is a card here with surface wear issues. It's hard to see unless you put the light on it correctly. But when you do, you can see all these problems with the finish of the card. This is slight surface wear, but this is enough to disqualify a card for near mint status. You can see the surface wear on the front as well. You can see it shouldn't have a new pattern when the light reflects off of it. Next we get good old grime. Here's one with some slight grime. You can see right there. That is not an issue with the surface of the card. That is an issue with something stuck on the card. I'm doing most of these as relatively subtle examples just so you can see what a light or subtle or minor issue would be. Here's an indentation on a card. Now just looking at the card without the light, you know, it looks normal, but you've got to get some light on it, and then there it jumps out right at you. There, nothing, but you can see it there. That would definitely be more than a slight one. That's, I would say, a moderate indentation at least, if not a major indentation. Here's a card with a bend on it. You can see the top corner up here has a bend. Get the focus on it right. The top corner here has a bend. Then we have here the different severities of the imperfection, and they run slight, minor, moderate, or major, and basically any of the types we've just discussed can have any of these different degrees of severity. A slight imperfection has minimal impact on the surface area of the card, no more than a centimeter in height or width, less than 2% of the surface area of the card. A minor imperfection is noticeable versus minimal, and no more than 2 centimeters in height or width, or less than 5% of the surface of the card. Moderate is much more significant, up to 3 centimeters and up to 10% of the overall card to be moderate. Anything beyond that is considered a major imperfection. Now there's also something else that impacts the condition of the card called a defect. This is separate from imperfections. Defects are printer or manufacturer characteristics rather than wear that has happened to the card after it was printed. There are different kinds of that. Some that impact the integrity of the card, like say a crimp, a miscut, missing elements from the card. So if they fail to print, like say for instance the power and toughness of a creature, or the foil stamping on a rare. And then there's there's defects that don't impact the integrity of the card. This would be like a print error, or a printer line, or an ink splotch, or one color of the ink didn't get printed on the card, things like that. If you have anything like this, don't just throw them away. Don't sell them as near mint regular cards either. There are collectors of these items out there. They usually have a pretty active Facebook group with people who are willing to spend a good amount of money on these types of cards. So definitely don't just get rid of them categorically. Now there are a couple of common defects that are not very sought after, which you should know about. That would be curling, specifically of foils. If you're a Magic person, you know about foil curling. TCGplayer considers anything less than a 5mm flex due to the curl of the card while it is resting on a tabletop to be standard normal, and anything beyond 5mm is considered damaged. I'll say that curled cards are really annoying, especially when they're supposed to be premium products like foils. There are ways to uncurl cards safely. There's videos out there about it. I'll probably make one about it before too long. But don't sell curled cards as near mint. Another common defect that's not very much sought after is cards that are printed off-center, but not far enough off-center to be considered miscut. And so that means they're not showing the edge of another card on the face of the card. This would be, when the card face is not quite aligned, but it's not quite off the edge either. TCGplayer considers centering of 70-30 to be acceptable. Anything beyond that is considered off-center, which they would want you to put a picture of it if you're going to sell it. Don't sell those as near mint. There are people who will buy them, but they are a lot less common than full-on miscuts where it's off the edge like this. Finally, we get into the section of standards for conditions, and basically this is the section where TCGplayer describes their point system for determining what condition a card falls into based on the imperfections on the card. The points are handed out as a slight defect, a slight imperfection gets 1 point, minor gets 2 points, moderate gets 4 points, and major gets 8 points. Then a certain number of points will push you further down the list of different conditions. To start with, a near mint card has minimal handling or play wear. It is allowed up to 3 points of imperfections. Notably, the presence of any surface wear, grime, or bend is enough to disqualify a card from near mint status. If it has slight edge wear, slight scuffing, slight indentations, even a minor scratch or a slight defect, then it is still eligible for near mint status according to TCGplayer. A lightly played card is allowed up to 6 points, and it shows some signs of handling but does not display significant imperfections. So this would cover most of your minor imperfections and allow some slight surface wear or slight grime over just a very small portion of the surface of the card. Next, we would have moderately played. Up to 12 points is allowed. Anything with the word moderate is going to get you into moderately played. Also, minor bends, minor faults, minor grime, that kind of thing. Heavily played allows up to 24 points. And that's going to cover most of your major stuff of your less significant imperfections, and then some other of the more moderate, more severe imperfections. And then anything that doesn't make it into heavily played is considered damaged. This would be cards with bends in them that make a V when you flex the card. Something that's been inked on the edges to cover up whitening, print that's been shifted so far as to show another card or show a full cut dot on the card, stuff with indentations on it that you can feel through the sleeve, things like that, that will be considered damaged. So that's TCGplayer's card conditioning standards. My own personal practices are a little bit pickier than TCGplayer's. I'll keep these standards in mind for sure, but generally speaking, if there's some imperfection on the card that I can notice and I send that card out to somebody, they're almost certainly going to notice it too. And if I send them a card that's supposed to be near mint and they receive the card with an obvious imperfection, even if it's a very slight one, even if it falls within these guidelines, then that's going to be a negative experience for the customer, which means they aren't going to seek a repeat of that experience. They may leave negative feedback. They may want a refund on the card. But even if they don't message me, if I never hear from them again and never know about it, they're not going to buy cards from me again, and they're going to tell other people to not buy cards from me again. So I just cut everything with a noticeable imperfection of any kind. I know it's kind of harsh, but I'm not willing to put the customer through that experience and then have that negatively impact me when I could just prevent it. Moreover, I don't sell at any level below near mint when I'm selling singles. I know there are a lot of people who advise selling all of their near mint cards at lightly played just to avoid that type of conditioning issue. I have 3 problems with this attitude. Firstly, it changes the customer expectations for the difference between near mint and light play, because you're sending them near mint cards for light played, so they expect every card that would be a light play card to meet those near mint standards. Secondly, it leaves money on the table because a lot of times those light play cards sell for a lower price than near mint cards, obviously. So, I mean, in the bulk game, that's usually pennies, but pennies add up. That's kind of the philosophy around here. And thirdly, I found that customers are pickier about condition when they are purchasing cards that are below near mint condition. So if they are someone who is purposely buying a card that is listed as light play condition, they're going to go over that condition a lot more closely than in someone who buys a near mint card. They're going to quibble about whether it's light play versus moderately played a lot more often and than someone who's buying a near mint card quibbling about whether it's near mint or light played, especially if you're making sure that everything is near mint. So that's the card conditioning standards. What do you guys think? Do you think it's a good idea, well reasoned and executed? Do you think the whole project is rubbish? Do you think it's a good idea, but maybe TCGplayer should tweak the point system so there's a bit more balance in the meta against combo decks? Let me know below. Give me a like if this was helpful at all, subscribe for more videos like it, and if you want to see a recent bulk collection I received in less than ideal condition, click on this video over here, and you can have a look at that.